All right, it is definitely Tuesday, February the 6th, and of course, a lot of things are going on in the world, so we'll be talking about those. And of course, I've got Rick Rosner with me, and others may be joining us later as well. But let me see what's happening in the world. Of course, a lot of people are paying attention to over there in London and King Charles, because apparently Prince Harry is to visit King Charles in coming days. So King Charles cancer diagnosis, which a lot of people have been talking about, has definitely put the spotlight on his son William, and definitely a lot of folks will be seeing how things go as things are going in that whole succession plan and all along those lines. Even though he is definitely, it seems like, in good health for now, but I know a lot of people, when you get those cancer diagnoses, are wondering how it will play out in the world of politics, particularly if you are part of a monarchy and all along those lines. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. But definitely there's other news, including some catastrophic wildfires that are likely the deadliest on record in Chile. That is according to a UN agency. And the fingerprints on Chile's fire and the California floods, people are saying that El Nino and the warming of the climate has a lot to do with that. Over there in Chile, hundreds of people are missing as the death tolls from the Chile's wildfire reaches 123. And who knows, that number may go up as the wildfires are continuing and that things are going on in that part of Latin America. So a lot of people will be paying attention to how the weather is impacting them also, and particularly wildfires. Iran has gone public with stark warnings over suspected spy ship as the U.S. refuses to rule out more strikes. So that is something that people are paying attention to, as the Houthis fired missiles at ships in the Red Sea, and one sustained minor damages. So that is something else that people are paying attention to, and all along those lines. And over in Israel, 107 Palestinians were killed in an Israeli attack. So that is something that is going on. And Israel says it plans a ground offensive onto a city on the border with Egypt. So as I've said before, it might be expanding into other parts of the Middle East as well. And Israel says it will expand operations in Rafah, Gaza's last refuge, I should say. So definitely that is something that people will be paying attention to as well. And over in Africa, the Senegal parliament has delayed elections until December after a opposition showdown. So definitely does look like that will be taking a delay. Wonder if that'll ever happen here in the United States. But over there, they had elections that were set for one time, and now they've had to move them back until things happen with the opposition lawmakers and all along those lines. So definitely, this whole notion of political gamemanship, but also things that change politics, can definitely happen, and don't just happen here in the United States and all along those lines. Actually, some people from Senegal, so I might try to reach out to them and see if they want to come on this show in the near future and share what their thoughts are about their country. But Senegal's parliament voted Monday to delay the West African nation's presidential election until December 15th in a chaotic voting process that took place after opposition lawmakers were forcibly removed from the chamber as they debated President Macky Sall's earlier decision to delay the crucial election. So, like I said, they have some things going on with their legislators as well. So, security forces stormed the legislative building and forcefully removed several opposition lawmakers who were trying to block the voting process on the unprecedented delay of the presidential election initially scheduled for February 20th and all along those lines. So there are 50 countries that are going to the polls in 2024. So it does look like there will be a lot of races on the political landscape in this year and all along those ways. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out because there's going to be a lot of conversation around politics and how politics is not just here on the United States side, but on the global front as well. So definitely that is something that people will be paying attention to and observing because it looks like we're going to have in 2024 50, I said 50 elections and all along those lines. So it'll be quite interesting to see how this all plays out and what goes on in that way. You know, there was a earthquake in Turkey last year, and apparently some people are still mourning the death of their loved ones on the first anniversary of that earthquake. So definitely that is something that, even though it happened last year, people are still remembering it and remembering their lost ones as well. So that is something that people are paying attention to, just like they're paying attention to what's going on in the Middle East. Because in the Middle East, a drone attack killed 6 Kurdish-led fighters at a U.S. base in East Syria. So that is something going on as a deadly drone attack hits a training ground at Syrian base that was housing U.S. troops. So as I keep saying, it does look like we're getting pulled further and further into some of these conflicts and all along those lines. So definitely this will be interesting to see how this all plays out and what else goes on in that way and what other people have to say about that also. Well, like I said, there is a lot of things happening in the world, including things happening here in the U.S. I know that there is a deadly California storm that has triggered flooding, mudslides, and power outages over there where Rick Rosner is, and some of our other people are there in California. And it looks like Trump has finally revealed who he's eyeing for vice president. So Tim Scott responds to Trump considering him for vice president. So apparently this might be who Donald Trump is looking at, is Tim Scott to be his vice presidential candidate. That would be quite interesting and all along those lines. And Nevada holds its presidential primaries, but Trump isn't on the ballot. So Biden and Haley are on the ballot, but not Trump, as Nevada holds presidential primaries over there in that area. So definitely they are having that whole GOP caucus and all along those lines. So definitely it'll be interesting to see what's happening on that. And for those of you that are wondering about that wildfire that took place there in Hawaii, Maui police released a 98-page report on the Lahaina wildfire response, because I do know that there were some people that were critical of the way that that wildfire was handled. And I know in the past, I've reached out to one of our past guests, Debbie Peterson, who's in that area and from that area. So maybe she can come back and share us some more thoughts about that and all along those lines. So definitely it'll be interesting to see what's going on. And apparently some people are wondering, coming back to Haley, Nikki Haley that is, they're saying that her long shot bid is fueling questions about her end game. So what is the end game if she can't necessarily win the presidency? Maybe she's trying to get a position. Maybe she wants that vice presidential spot, even though they are very much having animosity against each other. So I don't see that in the cards, but other things that I didn't see in the cards have happened as well. So all these things can be sometimes said and can be quite interesting and all along those lines. So there's, a whole case around the Trump ballot eligibility, and concerned voters are making their own pitches as to what should go on, because it looks like this is going to be a Supreme Court issue and all along those lines. So definitely it'll be interesting to see what's going on in that way. And a Republican-led House has voted to impeach Mayorkas over the border issues. So House Republicans are ready to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas. So definitely it sounds like this border issue may be a cause for concern around Mayorkas and other people in his camp. And Republican governors are pledging resources for Texas in the border standoff with the Biden administration. And Governor Greg Abbott defends his migrant tactics in Eagle Pass amid escalating legal battles with the Biden administration. And migrants arrested by ICE agents in Phoenix might be suspects in the New York Police Department's cop beating and all along those lines. So it looks like they may have gone all the way back toward Arizona after that particular incident, which I believe was last week, if I am remembering correctly, and all along those lines. But like you said, getting to bring in Rick, and I know he might even be telling us about those mudslides and other things that are going on in his part of the world, because I did see that Southern California was bracing for potential mudslides, even as the rain has slowed. So definitely, it looks like that is some of the things that are going on over there in California and along those lines. So we'll bring in Rick and see what he's got to say about those mudslides and any other
Yeah,
things that he might want to
we
talk
had
about. But
one. We had one about 100 feet away from us across the street. There's a hill, and part of it let loose, but not very big, only about, I don't know, 10 feet wide, and they've already cleared away most of it. So,
well, that's good to know that they've cleared away most of it and all along those lines. So that's not a major issue and everything. What is your thoughts around this notion of Tim Scott being the vice presidential person? That apparently Donald Trump has floated that name. And I do know that in these conversations, names are oftentimes floated and they're not always the ones that are picked, but it is at least one that has been floated. And of course, he
well,
did do a lot of campaigning recently for Trump, and I guess maybe that's his opportunity or trying to get at some of the black and brown community and all along those lines. Even though I
right.
don't know that
So
Tim Scott,
Trump, you know that when you pick your VP, you try to pick somebody who will bring in votes that you wouldn't otherwise get.
right?
On the other hand, Trump often makes decisions that aren't the best. He's got I mean, he was America's worst businessman
Right.
from 1985 till about 2015, based on public records. He lost more money than any other American. So his decisions, can be, made in the heat of the moment. Who knows? I mean, we're still, I think, months away from him having to pick a VP.
Right, I agree, but I just found it interesting that he's floating that name, and of course, some people would say that he was somebody that was kissing some backside, if I can use that kind of conversation pointers and everything after he dropped out of the race. Is that meaning Tim Scott and all along those lines? But maybe that is the reward for kind of like saying good things about Trump after you pull out.
Now, the black people are about 12% of the U.S. population.
Mm-hmm.
Could he pick up some black votes by having a black VP? I don't know, because more than 80%, probably close to 90% of black voters don't vote for Trump. So, does he lower that from 90%, voting not for him to 80%? That only picks him up 1.2% of the U.S. population. Are there smarter choices in terms of picking up votes? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I did hear a report, and we talked about it on the Dr. Anthony show, that there are some people out there, even in the African American community. I think it was last year, in the latter part of last year, like around November or something, that there are about 20% of the African American population that are considering voting for Trump or might even vote for him, which would be a decent showing. And I don't know that Tim Scott's going to bump it up to 25 or even 30, but he might get a portion of people that are willing to look at him as a candidate. Because one of the things, and I played a video because it was a special on the role of African American males in politics and all along those lines. I think CNBC did it, if I am remembering correctly, and all along those lines. But they were saying, because there was a gentleman on one of the talks that was in part of the news reports leading up to it, that was saying that he had better economy under Trump than he did under Biden. And I don't know that I agree with that, but people have their own opinions as to all along those lines. But that is something that he was saying, and all in that space. So it'll be interesting to see. I see we've got Sasha Starr joining us, and I've actually got a question for both you and Sasha. Sasha's over there in Canada, but is also very active in following the situation with Russia's continued invasion of Ukraine and the Ukraine proud combat against that and all along those lines. And they've done a great job over several years and all along those lines. But that being said, Sasha, I did see that there was a media person. Some people may like him, some people may not, because he was connected with Fox at one point, and he is over there in Russia, apparently trying to maybe get an interview with Putin. Maybe he's trying to catch up with Putin. Maybe he's got some secret spy documents that he wants to deliver, and all along those lines. But Tucker Carlson is apparently in Moscow. And I just wondered your take, and also Rick, because Rick knows some of these celebrity types from California, because there are some people that I have even seen jokingly saying that they hope that he gets arrested while he's over there. And I'm not sure how much they are joking, how much they are serious, because there are a number of people that are probably quite serious because they're not Tucker fans. So what is your thoughts about Tucker going? And apparently he was seen leaving Putin's office. So maybe he's trying to get this great interview scoop or something. But what is your take on Tucker Carlson going to Moscow?
The most important thing is to understand where Tucker Carlson stopped on his way to Moscow. And in fact, he stopped in Hungary, in Budapest, and he had meetings with Viktor Orban, the president or prime minister of Hungary, I don't remember. And apparently he's not acting alone. It's all Trump's plan to build up the axis of United States with Trump as a president, Hungary, Orban, who is resist everything whatever European Union or NATO is trying to do, and finally Putin, the ultimate dictator of the world. So that's where the future is if Trump is elected as a president. Many signs tell me that Trump is not going to be elected as a president. Just moments ago, there was a decision of appeal court that Trump does not have immunity in January 6th case or any other cases. So this now opens all doors for all proceedings, because many proceedings were sort of stopped for a time being, waiting for the decision, because if he's indeed immune as he's proposed, then it doesn't make any sense to sue him because he's immune anyway. So why would you sue immune person? However, the news is that he is not immune person. So now all proceedings can go full speed ahead.
No, they can definitely go full speed ahead. I definitely want to hear from Rick his thoughts about Tucker and everything, but I also want to come back to you, Sasha, after I hear from Rick, because before you got here, I was hearing that Mr. Trump is floating Tim Scott as his vice presidential candidate. But before we get to that, Rick, your thoughts on Tucker, because I know that you've worked with Jimmy Fallon and some of these other news and late night types and everything. So what is your thoughts about Mr. Carlson going to Moscow and Hungary?
So everybody on the MAGAs on Twitter are very excited about this. A lot of extreme right-wing people on Twitter and out there in the wild, think of Tucker and Putin as heroes, and Orban too, as they're all strong men, and it's crazy to me because for 100 years, the Soviet Union and now Russia has tried to mess with U.S. politics via propaganda. And I have a show, we're doing some episodes tonight where I argue with my conservative friend Lance, who is well aware of this. He argues that Russian Soviet propaganda interference made us lose the Vietnam War. And yet he supports all this and denies that Russia has had fingers in U.S. electoral politics since 2016, when it's right there in front of your face. There's just, Russia invites senators, congressmen over there. People wonder, why is the right doing Russia's bidding? And part of it is to get Trump reelected, and part of it we don't know. But the ties between the Republicans and the Russians are really hard to deny. That being said, the betting odds changed slightly yesterday, where Trump if you're going to bet on the outcome of the election, Trump has been running steadily at 50%. And Biden went from about 38% to 37%, which is a minor change, but it's not in the direction I'd prefer. But I'm going to keep betting on Biden. I don't think the odds and the polls reflect what's going to happen. Trump's approval has remained remarkably steady in opinion polls since he announced for president in 2015. So for more than 8 years, he's had about 40% approval. And Biden in polls is currently under 40%. So it doesn't look great for Biden, but I don't think most voters, and I think Sasha would agree, have started paying a whole lot of attention to the election yet.
I think that the Democratic election machine hasn't started working yet. It's waiting and biding their time. They want to, first of all, assure who is Republican nominee. Although it looks like Trump will be, but it's not 100%. And while it's not 100%, they don't want to have just general messages about the economy is good or so on, because it will be washed out by November anyway. They're waiting until, first of all, who is your nominee, because the strategy will be different, whether it's a Trump nominee or what's her name?
Nikki Haley.
Yeah, exactly. So they're waiting until at least that will be clear. Now, once that is clear, then they can focus their campaign and start it. I don't think they should do anything before June, maybe even July, because then it will be the last 3-4 months before election. So then they can keep up increasing their messages, and they have much more money than Republicans to do very effective campaign. You should remember that the election will be decided in 3, maybe 4 states, with, if everything is going according to predictions. So the difference will be, say, plus minus 50,000 votes in these 3-4 states. So if you bombard this 3-4 states with ads, and it will be probably 5-1 in favor of Democrats, they will kill Republican chances in the states, and that's it. Then you have election.
Yeah, just really quickly before I get to another issue that impacts the East Coast and the West Coast, and even to some degree Canada. What is your thought, Sasha? Because before you got here, I had mentioned that I heard that former President Trump was floating the name of Tim Scott out there as his vice president. So what are your thoughts around that, and whether that will help him at all, whether it is getting some of the African-American vote, or whether it is just out there to hopefully have somebody that has been out there like Vivek and others actively campaigning for him with a position in his supposed second administration, should he get one, because that is a name that I think was floated yesterday.
I would recommend Scott to keep his day job. Not only that, first of all, Trump may not be even a nominee. There are a lot of now situations will start to develop with his legal issues, and quite rapidly now, since he's not immune. Although there's he can still appeal even that, because only panel of 3 judges heard that. So now he may ask all panel of 12 judges to hear his reasons why he's immune. It's not going to change anything, but it will delay, I don't know, whatever time. It might be a month, a few weeks. Okay, so but that's again delay, and it's you can work sometime, most of the time, but not all the time, and this is just the case, and that's not going to help him. Also, so what Tim Scott and Vivek and all these people, what's happened if indeed, because of his legal troubles, Nikki Haley will become a nominee? Do you know that convention, Republican convention, I think in July, even Trump will win technically the nomination, they may elect to appoint Nikki Haley as a Republican nominee on election, not Donald Trump. because of all these legal issues. See, he cannot, with all this legal problems, he cannot win election. He's not a winnable candidate. The women will be against him. Even I watched this Grammy Award, and I was watching the audience in Grammy Award, and I was thinking to myself, is there at least one person who will vote for Trump? I couldn't think of anyone who attended the awards. No.
I'm not sure, but I think that at least in the Grammys in the past, and Rick can correct me if I'm wrong and everything, but I think Kid Rock has been to a couple of those Grammys. I don't know if he was there this year, and I think that in the past he has been a supporter of Trump, and there's a couple of other supporters of Trump. But as I recall, and I could be wrong, I think it was Kid Rock that came out for Trump, and there might be
Kid Rock, Ted Nugent are the big musical supporters of Trump. And, Kanye sometimes is, but most of the entertainers, big name entertainers in America, lean left,
right,
mostly because, the Republicans, according to a Pew Research study, have moved 4 times as much to the right over the past couple decades as Democrats have moved to the left. And a lot of reasonable, well-informed people tend to lean left. So.
No doubt about that and everything. The other issue I was going to get to, and it's a issue, we kind of alluded to it with one of our guests last week and everything, only we were talking about the kids and the kids that are impacted by this. But apparently Florida is looking at adopting a new solution to the homeless crisis, and they are looking at banning camping in the public throughout Florida to get the homeless off the street. That is something that Governor DeSantis, a former presidential candidate, has put out there, and he is talking homeless legislation, particularly as we're going to head into the spring months. I know that we're in winter right now, but we're heading into the spring months, which means that there'll be a lot of young people heading toward spring break. And of course, we do know that Florida is a popular spring break location. So it looks like there is a bill that will be barring homeless camps that is moving steps closer to DeSantis's death. So I was wondering if there was similar kind of things going on in California, because I do remember there was times like when the Olympics was held there that they cleaned out the homeless population, and then I think the homeless population came back after that big event was done.
Well, we have the Olympics coming back in 2028, and right, so we just have a few years to come up with like a reasonable, and we probably won't come up with an effective way of dealing with the homeless, and we'll do what other cities have done when the Olympics come to town, which is move them out of town for a few weeks. So but with no permanent solutions. LA's been trying to build tiny homes and turn, hotels and into homeless housing, and it's been really expensive to put up these tiny houses, in the many tens of thousands of dollars per house. And yeah, it's an intractable problem. And yeah, Florida will probably have similar problems to us because Florida is a nice place to be outside most of the year, like Southern California. DeSantis is a lame duck. DeSantis can't run for governor again. His term is up in 2026. People think he might try to run for senator. He tries to look like a tough guy. His disastrous presidential campaign, I don't know, anything can happen in the next 4 years, but people wonder if he can ever run for president again because he did it so badly this time. But he's still trying to look like a tough guy to support whatever his future political ambitions are.
Yeah, definitely. Is there a serious homeless problem there in Canada, Sasha? And if so, how are they dealing with that in Toronto or some of the other cities that I'm aware of, like Vancouver and Montreal and other places? But have you heard a lot of conversations around the homeless there? And are there these camps, and are they kind of like finding ways to get rid of the camps the way that they're talking about doing in Florida?
Mark, lately I'm I haven't been in downtown Toronto now for some time. Generally speaking, there is a problem, but it's not something that it's impossible to deal with. That it brings a lot of attention. You see, in Canada, maybe because it's geographically speaking, it's very large territory. The issues are not becoming so much focused as in the United States. For example, the border problem in the United States.
Right.
Okay, it's a huge problem. Everybody's talking about it. It's problem number one or so on. Canada, they don't have border problems. Although I'm pretty sure there are illegal immigrants are coming, but they can come only from the United States, from where else. But even if we are talking about Latin American immigrants, they have to first of all cross the border with the U.S.,
Right.
go through all U.S., and then cross the border with Canada. And I think it will be far in between, and especially for these Latin American immigrants, Canada could be a very cold place to be in anyway. So because let's see, if Southern California and Florida, as you say, people can stay outside most of the time or so on. It's not the Canadian case. Even Vancouver, which is probably warmer than other cities, still in the winter, it's still low, say +5, +6 Celsius. It's not temperatures that you want to be outside necessarily. So I don't think that there's an issue. In downtown Toronto, I remember there were protests a few years ago during one of the, it was gathering of G7, or maybe something else, and so there was uprising in downtown Toronto. It was quite very quickly quashed by police, and then what's happened to these people, I have no idea. So there's homelessness issues, perhaps, but again, it's not something that would be in media, papers, or television. People would be upset about it and go on the streets to protest. Even
Yes.
So in the comments, Lee asks, "Is it humane to force homeless indoors?"
Right.
So LA has more homeless than any other U.S. city. I think we do an annual count. People go around, volunteers go out, and everybody takes a little area and they count the homeless. And the last count was 66,000 homeless people in a city of, I don't know what, about 8 million. So nearly 1% of the population is homeless. That doesn't include people with housing insecurity. You know, there are a lot, like maybe one college student in 10
Right.
or one person. We had somebody on talking about this from the 8, like one person in 10 age 17 to 25 in this country has uncertain housing, might be living in their car, couch surfing. So, you know, there's full on homeless. Then there are people who are on the verge of being homeless, and it's a ton of people. And there are legal issues dealing with, like, you know, most people who are homeless are sane, but some of them may have substance abuse issues, but maybe a quarter to a third of homeless people have, you know, mental health issues. There are civil liberties, you know, we don't have the right to take homeless people and confine them for more than 72 hours on a 5150 charge. And, you know, under Reagan, a lot of the mental health facilities, this is a long time ago now, 60 years ago, a lot of mental health facilities were shut down. So
Reagan would have been 80, so that would have been like 45 years ago.
No, under Governor Reagan in the 60s.
Yeah, 60 years ago with Governor Reagan, because that would have been like the 60s.
So there are issues with resources. There are issues with legal limits on what you can do with homeless people. And there's just a ton of them in LA, where even if we had like we have solutions, but those solutions can't take care of the nearly 70,000 homeless people here?
He's speaking of solutions and everything. And I want to come back to politics for a minute. And I'd love to hear both of your thoughts around this. But there has been a lot of questions around the notion of, who is cognizant, who is able to think straight, and all along those lines. And there have been a number of these incidences that have taken place. I've seen a few, even though they haven't been as reported as much, with former President Trump. And of course, there are numerous ones with Biden. It's apparently recently Biden confused Macron with the late President Mitterrand in a campaign speech, and Mitterrand apparently passed away back in 1996. So there's a lot of people that will be playing off of that and the fact that he's not remembering some of his fellow politicos and all along those lines. And apparently former President Trump is doing something a little bit in the unorthodox fashion, but then again, we know he is very unorthodox anyway, because usually they don't think about presidential debates until after both parties have got their candidates. But apparently Trump says he wants to debate Biden now for the good of the country. That's his words. He wants to do it for the good of the country. And of course, Biden has shrugged this off because he's like, wait a minute, like Sasha said, we're not even sure you're going to be the candidate and everything. But apparently Trump is wanting to debate Biden immediately. So I was wondering your thoughts around this, and if we're going to have a early debate, and if there are concerns from both of you about the mental abilities of both of these candidates, because that's part of what Nikki Haley is using, when she calls them the grumpy old man, and then she would like them both to take a competency test. But what is y'all's thoughts around that?
Each side accuses the other candidate of having dementia. Mm-hmm. I think Trump is more wacky than Biden by far. I don't think either of them has dementia. Biden, unfortunately, looks like hell. I mean, so does Trump in a different way. But Biden looks old because he is old. And his skin looks thin. He's got kind of old man face. And I wish somebody would work with him on walking. You get him on some pill that helps him walk more fluidly. He walks like a busted robot. Probably because he's sore, and probably because he's cautious about, I broke my wrist in London. I ate shit coming off a curb and smashed into the pavement. I've entered my, falling can kill you years, apparently. And, I understand the way Biden walks. You don't want to take a fall, but it looks bad. But I think Biden's brain works perfectly well.
Yeah. What's your take on it, Sasha? Do you think that this debate needs to happen? And are you concerned? I mean, I know you're observing from Canada and you're not necessarily voting here and everything, but I just wondered if you are concerned from a outsider's perspective in this notion of both of them having some mental competency issues.
All people have mental issues, number one. Number two, Biden is the president of the United States of America. Trump today is nobody. So why actually he has 91 convictions, charges against him, and he's losing all his shorts, if he has so many in this civil litigations. He's gonna put very soon probably $500 million in cash just to have a right to appeal. You know what? To be practical, Trump probably is not going to do it. He'll say, okay, so roll judgment against me. I'm not going to pay it anyway. I'll declare bankruptcy. I'll do this. Or maybe I will become a president and pardon myself. Whatever. He's full of tricks, and you don't know what up his sleeves. However, based on the very different social stature of Joe Biden and Trump, I don't see any possibility of any debates. I mean, just as well, Biden can debate anybody on the street, just any person who wants to debate him. Okay, come on in, we'll debate. Now, if he has difficulties with walking, I don't really see a problem if he's going to use wheelchair, and why not? Franklin Delano Roosevelt used one. And he was not that old yet, but his physical condition required it. So if Biden's physical condition will require use of wheelchair, I don't see any problem with that at all.
Well, I mean, I don't think he'll start using a wheelchair before the election because
Mhm.
I think that would let the other side, but also the media back then, they covered up a lot of stuff. They covered up president's affairs, and they covered up how crippled um, FDR was. They would strap leg braces on him and have him kind of totter up to a podium, but his legs didn't work at all.
Oh, it's still, he has a lot of lovers, and yeah, he was a very capable man, trust me.
Right?
So,
Yeah, he was having affairs and stuff, and the media covered that. The newspapers covered that up too. Yeah, and he was a vigorous guy, even though he lost the use of his legs to polio.
yeah, yeah.
Definitely loves the polio and everything.
But speaking about debate, one more thing I'd like to tell you that objectively, Trump, no, Biden, rather, he has nothing to gain from the debate with the quasi-criminal nominee or future nominee. He's not even a nominee yet. And Trump has a lot to gain because it's a great exposure for him to debate the president. And he has nothing done. I mean, Biden can ask him to put, $100 million and he will debate him. But Trump doesn't have that money.
Yeah, he's kind of broke and everything. Speaking of broke and all along those lines, and I know that Rick, your children are, I think you just got one, maybe it's more than one, but they are. Yeah, the one is definitely in the adult range because I know she just recently completed school and she's also recently in the process, if she hasn't already, of getting married and everything. But in Minneapolis and Minnesota, not that far from where Sasha is in Canada and everything, there is a new tax credit that is going out that will allow $1,750 per child available, and they're saying that 300,000 families could be impacted by this, and that this could be a game changer and all along those lines. So they're saying somewhere between $1,750 per child to $1,200 per child, but definitely that range and everything. But I just wondered, when you had the child and were younger, would that have been something that you would have been in favor of? Because they're saying that this is going to be a game changer for families in that particular state. And I know that there are other states that have been looking at that. And I think it's even been in some of our federal laws as well. So I just wanted your thoughts around the ability to have a credit if you have a kid.
Yeah, when we had the child whatever credit that expired, I don't know, a few months ago, we had the lowest rate of child poverty in history in the U.S. I'm in favor of anything that cushions life a little bit, and this is just a little bit for parents and kids. The U.S., like Republicans like to say that this is part of our march to socialism, but there's the Heritage Foundation, a conservative organization, does a yearly economic freedom index, which measures basically how capitalist every country in the world is, except for some countries that are so screwed up you can't even put them on an index. And the U.S. is the 25th most capitalist country out of about 170 countries ranked, and the most capitalist out of any like mega huge country. And it's fine to have a little bit of help for people, and it doesn't mean that we're going socialist. Yeah. And with technology and AI, leading to increasing job displacement, we're going to need to figure out how to help people more in the future, and without like a bunch of GOP yahoos, in my opinion, screaming that anything like that is socialism.
Speaking of that and everything, and I was curious, and I'm glad that Toby has joined us and everything, but I definitely want to hear from Sasha as well. I mentioned earlier that they found the people that beat up the police officer in New York in Phoenix, Arizona, and apparently there's some migrants from Venezuela that have been arrested in the Bronx for a New York City crime spree, according to the New York Police Department and everything. So we do know that historically speaking, whether it's the African American community or the Latin American community or a number of other communities, there's been this notion of profiling and all along those lines. So I was wondering, are we going to see a spike in profiling of particularly our brown citizens because they have come into the United States, and some people may automatically be assuming that they are criminals, whether they come from the criminal element or not, and everything. So, Rick, I see you've got something you want to say, and maybe you can tell me what you come to that as well. But definitely, any thoughts around this notion of the possibility of profiling? Because I think we may already have seen 2 incidents in New York.
There was a TV commercial for dishwashing liquid 50 years ago, where the punchline was the lady's getting a manicure, and the lady giving the manicure says, "You're soaking in it." So I don't know that there would be a spike in profiling, but we're soaking in it. There's always been a ton of, Jatovy maybe can talk to it. It's been there. It'll continue to be there. 4 guys, getting arrested, the Republicans will try to gin up more outrage and more caravans as we get closer to the election, but it's always been a problem.
Jatovy?
There will be a spike. What will be used is these 4 individuals, just like it happens with any black person or whatever. They will be breaking the law in the minds of the people that have used the word invasion, have said that they're coming to steal our job, illegal, and all this other stuff, that have demonized these individuals. Those 4 individuals have confirmed everything in their minds, and the people that were even shaky on the fence. So what's going to happen is there's going to be a spike, and people are going to, go after tons of migrants. Even if you look Hispanic, you're going to be attacked because of the fact that show me your papers is going to pop back out. Are you even supposed to be here? This is my country. Even though it's been there already, it's going to pick back up, because what they're going to use is the fact that these 4 individuals that did this are going to represent every brown person there is. And it's sad that that's the reality, but we have to be honest about it. That's what's going to happen. Look at what happened. I mean, even in take George Floyd, or even the protests that were around George Floyd. Well, every black person was a thug. Every black person was this. Every black person was that. Look at what happened with even when we talk about the what's going on in Gaza and what's going on with Israel right now, to a lot of those same individuals that are talking about this invasion and all this and that and the other thing. They're already looking at every Palestinian as a member of Hamas, which is untrue. So they're going to be, look at 9/11. After 9/11, there was a spike in anti-Muslim hate. So these things create waves in our society, and that ripple effect will bounce out, and it will harm, and there will be spikes here and there. Hopefully not that many, but hopefully it'll tamper down real quick. But we have to understand that those 4 are an outlier in comparison to the actual statistics and data that's there. The statistics and data already show for a fact that migrants themselves have a lower crime rate in comparison to native-born Americans.
Which makes total sense, because the downside, you risked your life to come to America for a better life. And the downside of getting legal entanglement is much worse than for a native-born American. I've talked about this a lot before, that Mexican people drive more slowly than I wish they would on the streets of LA, and it's because they don't want legal entanglement.
But speaking of that legal entanglement and everything, and I saw that Steve's joined us, and hopefully he's got some things that he wants to share as well before we wrap up. And we got Ukraine, Russia coming at 11 o'clock and everything. But there was a Colorado family that actually just got a $1.9 million settlement because they were mixed up in a case of a stolen vehicle. So the officer drew a weapon at the family. And there's actually a very poignant picture of the young lady, because one of the kids is definitely a child and everything. And there was a mix up. So they were sued after they were held at gunpoint by the police. And like I said, they have now got $1.9 million when they were wrongfully detained by the police. I believe that was last year, if I'm remembering correctly, and all along those lines. So we'll see if that more of that kind of response happens, because we do know there have been some settlements where people have got settlements after they have been unjustly.
Well, so the problem with that, and just to answer Lee's question, yes, there is anti-Semitism that is out there, and that is spiked due to the war as well. And that is the same thing. That is the same spike where people believe that if you're Jewish here, you believe in genocide there, or you believe in you hate all Palestinians. Yes, that's the same thing. So yes, Lee, there's a lot more to the anti-Semitism that is out there, but that falls into the same spike. But what you're talking about, Mark, in terms of the receiving the settlement afterwards, the problem with that is the same problem that happens in a lot of minority communities. As you know, the damage has been done. So, you can receive settlement afterwards and so on and so forth. But what about the traumatic event that child is now going to grow up with and never want to speak to the cops, or if anything goes bad, or the traumatic event where that father is now caught up in the justice system, now has struggles to get a job, or that mother cannot prepare or help their family. So getting caught up in the justice system is a bad thing, especially for minorities, but it is a bad thing.
Yeah, just really quick, I did want to get to Steve in case he had some things. But speaking of things that are traumatic, and I'll bring this up just really quickly because it happened in a state that I used to know and everything. I really feel sorry when I hear about some of these incidences that happen, that the people are just beginning their life and all along those lines. And we know that in war, this oftentimes happens as well. But apparently there is a person of interest in a shooting death of newlyweds that took place at a Wisconsin sports bar. So we know we oftentimes talk about gun control, but they literally were just starting their life and were going to a sports bar after literally having just gotten married. So talk about trauma and everything. That will definitely be traumatic for that particular family in that double homicide. And maybe we'll have some conversations around gun control and the need for gun control on later editions of the show. But when I saw that, it was very touching, to say the least.
So gun control is almost impossible in America. You got 1.2 guns for every American. A third of a billion Americans, over 4 million, close to 450 million guns. The cows are way out of the barn on that. And I think, because I read a lot of science fiction, the only way to fix it is 100 years from now to make people bulletproof, that you download your consciousness into a box. If somebody shoots you, you just, but
I think there was a whole movie made about that, but you totally can correct me, but I think it was called Upload or something like that, where they were able to upload their consciousness, if I'm remembering correctly.
Actually, Upload was a TV series set where you could upload your consciousness into a VR or a virtual reality or a metaverse. It was actually Altered Carbon, which was the one that Rick was talking about. Because that's
Altered Carbon, crappy show. Upload, great show. Upload is by the guy who did The Office, so it's very funny.
Gotcha. Hey, Steve, just really quickly, because like I said, we've got a few more minutes. So any things that you care, we've been talking about.
Just real quickly, my insight, I've got 11, I've got to leave too, but I just want to come and say hi to everybody. I think the main thing is that obviously the border deal is dead on arrival. This is not, obviously a setback for Ukraine as well. I'm encouraging folks in North Carolina, call their senators and urge support of the deal. But I think at the end of the day, the challenge that we face is that there are still too many migrants coming in that we can handle. And part of the reason is that there's a confusion between immigration and asylum. So, asylum is when you, for political reasons, you have to document and show this is why I need to come to this country. And so many people are coming into the border, not having gone through the asylum process and just thinking that they can stay here. So I think that's the challenge that we face. The things went south for Biden when they lifted Title 42, number of migrants went from 12,000 to 4,000. And after the Title 42 was lifted, after the COVID pandemic was over, that's when the numbers went up. Now, I think one thing, the last thing I'll say is that we should have work permits. Maybe there's a process that we can put in place to put these migrants to work during certain seasons of the year and then send them back. I think deportation is bad, just sending them back. But I don't think it's costing New York $12 billion. And, I think that this is something that we have to think about. But the Republicans aren't going to work with the Democrats because they know that they can use this as an I told you so. And that's all this is going on. It's being used as a political football.
But
And
speaking
so
of political
I'm thinking-
football,
Just to touch on
quickly, hold on a second, just really
Okay.
quickly along those same lines and everything. You said that there's a distinction between asylum and some of the other ways of folks getting into the country and everything. I would also argue that there is somewhat of a confusion between the different styles of migration as well, because as I know, and I brought it up on this show a couple of times, there is I think it's called the H-1/2 visa, which is more of the skilled labor and all along those lines. And then there are the people that are coming across that are doing more of farm labor. So there is that distinction as well, because there are different types of migrants that are coming across, and some of it is easier to get and some of it is harder to get. And some people have a greater benefits when they come in under, I think it's the H-1/2 visa, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, and everything. But that's another distinction that I don't think people always are willing to talk about.
We
Yeah,
have
I
a
mean-
history of welcoming foreign farm workers, and it's only recently when it became. I mean, we've gone back and forth. We had the Bracero program under Eisenhower, and then that turned into Operation Wetback, which was like a reverse. I don't know, but this has gone on for a long time. But for a lot of that time, we are okay with foreign farm workers.
But again, we're just so focused on one aspect of immigration and we forget about what it really is. I mean, we're talking about the H-1B visa coming across for the farming and everything else. But what about those that go into nursing or the doctors or this and that, the other thing that come in on a TN visa and come in on other visa applications that are there, and they end up overstaying their welcome. Therefore, a lot of the quote unquote illegal immigrants are individuals that are here but have overstayed their welcome and their visa has expired. So therefore, we're talking about illegal immigrants that are actually helping us and doing big things. On top of that, we keep referring to Title 42 as if we don't know that Title 42 was only put in place because COVID was there, and it was actually a COVID restriction. So therefore, it wasn't that Trump shut down everything because there was a spike, and then Trump actually shut down the government to actually try and get his executive orders that were challenged by the courts pushed out, that were not working. So he had to put in because Title 42 came in, and there's no way you can keep Title 42 with COVID restrictions when that pandemic is gone. So if we can't really have it both ways. And Steve, I'm glad you got to the point, because we have to be honest about this situation. There are issues at the border. If we cannot work on those issues, then don't tell me that there are issues at the border. Don't cry to me that there are issues at the border if you're not going to work on them. And that's what the Republican Party is doing. The issue isn't the fact that, we can't work on it or Biden's not doing this. No, it's the fact that Trump told the House Republicans that it's dead on arrival. Before Trump said that, it was actually going through the process and it was actually moving and it had a chance to pass. But then because of political purposes. So therefore, we have to remember to stress it even more than there's an issue at the border, that there is a political problem. And it's the fact that we cannot do anything for this quote unquote emergency when you have individuals blocking federal agents from doing their job or blocking bills so we cannot have them pass to actually work on the border. It's as if somebody, if you're on a cruise ship and somebody has a hole in their room and the actual maintenance crew comes by the door and says, hey, we got to come in that room and fix that hole. And they lock their door and say, no, you cannot fix this hole. I'm going to let this ship sink. And
Sasha,
that
you're on the last point.
Yeah, hold on a
Guys,
second,
I
just really
gotta
quickly.
catch a plane out of here, but thank you. We'll be back. I'll be back sometime tomorrow. But thank you. Sasha has one last point. Talk to you guys tomorrow.
I'd like to elaborate why Republicans are so much against any issues on the border, fixing it or do anything about it. That's the only one issue on which Trump can run. He cannot run on economy. Economy is booming, is doing fantastically well. He cannot do any other issues except this ploy of delaying or derailing any attempts to fix the border issue. So that's the only one issue on which Trump can run. If that will be somehow fixed before the election or during the election or so on, Trump has nothing absolutely to sell his people except that election was stolen and let's make America great again. That's the only thing what he can
Hey,
say.
Sasha, just really quickly, it's time for the Ukraine-Russia show, and you've got your people ready on the other side, so we're going to get out of here.
Okay.
Rick will come back on tomorrow to continue
you.
this conversation and other conversations as well. But I know we've got Naked at Night later on as well, and world politics. But right now, let's get on out of here. It's time for Russia, Ukraine, and China.